Hello, Thrive Nation. Got a very unique, special mushroom guest on the show today. It's going to be a mushroom masterclass. It sounds quite groovy. Many of you, when you think of mushrooms, you might think of magic mushrooms. You might think of things like psilocybin and things that really put you on a bit of a trip. But we are going to have it deconstructed. We're going to have it distilled. But I think by one of the most experienced experts in the mushroom world. He's 13 generations from what I know in terms of harvesting and the science and art of mushrooms. Welcome to the show, Tero from Four Sigmatic.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Brilliant, Tero. I really want to talk about incredible stories. There are going to be people listening. We want to really grab their attention about some stories, maybe athletes, maybe people with, significant disease, chronic disease, really battling fatigue, tiredness, insomnia, anxiety, depression, whatever it is. Give us your two top stories, one male, one female, that people can relate to.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I've spent more than 2 decades working with mushrooms and adaptogens professionally. And I've heard a lot. A lot of the stories are around cancer and autoimmune. Unfortunately, here in the United States, I'm not allowed to talk about those stories. So people can Google and find out stories about mushrooms and cancer and mushrooms and autoimmune themselves. But two stories that are completely separate that come to mind. One is with a professional athlete, and he had LASIK surgery. So he had glasses, and he was an action sport athlete, so it was hard to wear glasses or contact lenses, and so he went to get LASIK surgery. And he took one of these adaptogens, acerola, which is in the cherry family, and chaga, which is a mushroom, and those are both super high in, the other one is high in vitamin C and the other one is high in melanin and SOD, which are all these antioxidants. So antioxidants are things that help heal, right? So he took them and went into his 1-week checkup, and the doctor said in all his career, he's never seen anybody heal that quickly. Funny enough, without me knowing that story, I took acerola and chaga when I had my own LASIK surgery. I didn't know about this story. I had exactly the same protocol, and I went to one of the top LASIK people in the whole world, and I got it done, and I had to travel very soon. And the doctor said, you can't travel that quick after the surgery, but come and show me your eyes. And if they're fine, I'll let you fly. But normally you might have to cancel your flight. So I go in, I do everything I can. So acerola, chaga, and the same story. The doctor says, I have never seen anybody heal eyes that quickly. And you're totally safe to fly. You've healed in less than a week what people heal normally in a month with the eyes. So I think it's a powerful healing story for a lot of things, and it's just tissue and cells, so you could deploy that to any form of healing. The other example I want to give is it's a high performance professional who was doing event management, and this person was constantly setting up events for this large company and was in this rat race of kind of like constant stimulation, constant stress, always the next thing, and could not sleep, was so stimulated that could not sleep. And then through her partner came across reishi and took reishi mushroom and took it just before bed, and suddenly started able to sleep, and was able to sleep just by adding one thing, which is reishi mushrooms in the evening, better than she had slept in decades. And those are, I think, two examples of many thousands of stories that illustrate both the healing and hormonally balancing effects of what mushrooms and adaptogens can do.
Brilliant. We're going to get into definitions, but from your experience, Tero, and I know you've been in the game for a long time, in your own life, over 20 years, plus family, generational mushroom farming, what are the biggest groups of conditions that are going to help with functional mushrooms?
Yeah. Most of the research and most of the functionality is tied to immunity and gut health. Now, some of people listening might have heard this term microbiome, meaning kind of bacteria in your gut. And some of you might have heard that the gut is your second brain. There's a connection between gut and your brain. This vagus nerve connects us, and it's very true. And you have to understand that wherever in the world you pretty much find bacteria, you find fungi. So on your skin and on your gut, you have fungi or mushrooms, and fungi is the family where mushrooms live. So you'll have fungi all in your gut, and gut and immunity are connected. So think of this link between your gut, your brain, and your immunity. And most of the beneficial parts of fungi and most of the studies around fungi around cancer, which helps to stimulate immune system, autoimmune, which it helps to calm an overactive immune system. It's around healing gut, healing issues that are gut based. So I would say mostly immunity and gut, which are not things that many people focus on, but that they impact your health in many layers from there.
Oh, brilliant. And the audience is very well versed. We'll link to William Davis from his Super Gut book. We've had him on the show. We've spoken about the nasal microbiome, the oral microbiome. We've had at least 5 biological dentists on the show. Dominic Nischwitz as well from your area of the world, who wrote all about It's in Your Mouth. So we'll link to those shows because not only the gut microbiome, but obviously the oral, nasal, skin microbiome is very, very important. So, okay, so immunity and gut health. And then just what about people who've suffered with anxiety and depression and insomnia? We're seeing a plethora of increase of anxiety in South Africa to the degree of at least 56% in the last 2 years. A lot of corporate work, Tero, that people are really battling, taking extended leave, they're not coping, there's overwhelm, uncertainty, instability. Things in Africa have really been hit by COVID and the war. So tell us a little bit about these mushrooms and just stress. Someone's listening, really battling with anxiety and stress in terms of functional mushrooms.
Yeah, for sure. So they're not a cure-all for all things in life. But what they will do is they will provide your body with the nutrients and the tools to balance and get back to this homeostasis, this equilibrium which you probably don't have if you're overly stressed. A lot of the stress is created in our endocrine system. So the body has 11 systems. There are skeletal system, reproductive system. But what probably triggers a lot of people's, at least the stress response, is our endocrine system. So think of our hormones in layman terms. So the hormones are these slow moving messengers, and they give us messages that are evolutionary triggered. So think of a lion attacking us. Therefore, you get in fight or flight. Now the lion is replaced by email and Facebook messages, right? But the reaction is very similar. Yeah. And so we don't get to this parasympathetic our nervous system, our energy, and our hormones are triggered. Therefore, we struggle sleeping. And honestly, if I can recommend one thing for health, which is probably more powerful than anything else, maybe on the only thing on the lines of hydration, is sleep.
Yeah.
And your literally studies show that your IQ goes up if you sleep. And I haven't slept. I had 4 days ago, I had a newborn child. So I'm experiencing it right now myself. But sleep is so important, and it's hard to sleep if you're hormonally out of whack. Yeah. So what these mushrooms do is, particularly mushrooms like reishi that I mentioned for the sleep, is that they balance our endocrine system. So particularly this HBA axis, hypothalamus, adrenal, pituitary gland axis. So there's this triangle in our body that regulates a lot of our stress responses. So it brings it down and calms it, and therefore at night you're naturally easier to fall asleep. So what I would say is that they're allies for balancing and restoring what your body naturally can do, but you might need them as a tool to get if you're chronically stressed.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's really, really important. South Africa was voted a while back as the second most stressful country to live in the world. So in terms of stress, in terms of sympathetic overdrive and, just not balancing out with the parasympathetic nervous system, we've got some significant things to consider living here in this country.
Who was the number one?
I don't know. People ask me. I've got to go back to that Bloomberg article and find out who was number one. But we've got our own stresses and strains. A beautiful country, beautiful continent, but some things to consider. So now what I want you to do for us, Tero, is I want you to talk about functional mushrooms. I know you run a mushroom academy. I do want to talk about adaptogens. I know you've written a book called Healing Adaptogens, which I think is very, very important. But give us a basic view of what a functional mushroom is. I know there's things like lion's mane, chaga, possibly like the functions that are really important. You've mentioned reishi and turkey tail and these type of things, that so people can have like a grid of where they are. Now they're listening. Okay, so what's a functional mushroom? What's a medicinal mushroom? And I think that gives people a little bit of a sort of a grid of what's going on when they just hear the shroom. They just think all these mushrooms are sort of the same.
Yeah. So fungi are a kingdom, one of 5 or 6 kingdoms in biology. People mostly focus on animals and plants, so Animalia and Plantae, but bacteria and fungi that we mentioned are often overlooked. So fungi is a big group. There's a lot of them. There's more than 6 times of fungi species than there's plant species. So if you go to the grocery store and you see a tomato and a cucumber and a salad, every one of those 4 is about 6 times fungal species. Now, some of them are invisible. So you breathe in mushroom seeds or spores.
Yeah.
You find them as yeast in beer, wine, bread, cheese, any fermented product, sauerkraut, kimchi. They use fungi. But for human consumption, we mostly focus on the mushroom. Mushroom is the fruiting body of the fungal kingdom. So think of an apple from an apple tree. So when we talk about the mushroom, we talk about the actual apple growing out of the apple tree. So historically, you could think of the toadstool shape that you might have seen. Not every mushroom looks like a toadstool, but that is the mushroom. And out of all the mushrooms, there's many one can eat. Simplistically, I like to characterize them in 3 groups: culinary, functional, and psychedelic. Now there is poisonous mushrooms and there's other mushrooms that don't fall into this, but for human benefits. Culinary would be your button mushroom, or many of these foods you see in a restaurant. These can be tasty. Some people hate them, some love them. They have fiber, some vitamins, some minerals. They can be an excellent meat substitute as well. There's some nutritional value, but you wouldn't write a book necessarily on them for nutritional purposes, maybe for culinary purposes, yes. And then there's these psychedelic mushrooms that are very powerful, in many cases illegal in most countries. And they give you very powerful visuals and impacts. And now studies are coming out and there's pharmaceutical companies creating, antidepressants based on them. And functional mushrooms are kind of between these 2 worlds. So the culinary is very safe, but not a lot of nutritional value. The psychedelics are very powerful, but it almost could be potentially too powerful, therefore they're illegal. And functional are in this half, where they are safe and legal, but they have little more benefits than the culinary, but not as much as the psychedelic. So you could have them every day. So that's how I would classify them, is they're in between the culinary and the psychedelic, and they're completely safe and legal to take. And you'll feel many health benefits for immunity, beauty, brain, sports performance, mood, longevity, sleep. These are things that people often use them for. But they are not like, you don't take them one day and then not take them for a year. There are things that are supposed to be part of a daily routine.
Okay, good. That's a brilliant summary. Culinary, functional, and then maybe medicinal or psychedelic mushrooms. As a doctor of TCM now, running a dispensary the last 23 years, seen thousands of patients. I've used these functional mushrooms in sort of different supplements and that in different companies. And I found them to be sometimes beneficial for some people, not so beneficial. Everybody's either high, moderate, or, low reactor with regards to any type of supplement. There's no silver bullet at all. But maybe take us through the main ones, because, when I think of just these like bacteria, though, like taking probiotics and making sure you have fermented foods, there's the bacteria side of it. And I'm very convinced that maybe not as a supplement, everybody needs good bacteria. They either fermented foods or they need a good probiotic. And then I had Wade Hart from Biooptimizers talk about enzymes. We did an enzymes masterclass, and he was saying everybody needs enzymes because of industrialization of food. Unless you're eating wild food, they've destroyed the enzymes on our food. So we need the bacteria, we need fermented food, and some people don't do well on fermented food for certain reasons. So obviously there are exceptions, but we want to make sure that we take probiotic or fermented food, make sure that we get bacterial or microbiome diversity, and then take the enzymes. For some people we've had incredible testimonies. Now, does everybody need these functional mushrooms? Because it would seem that would be fungi, bacteria, and enzymes, and then you're going to get a very robust microbial diversity.
Yeah. Long story short is we have the microbiome, but we have a mycobiome. Myco referring to the word around fungi, so mushroom, Latin word mycobiome. So if you take mushrooms or you don't take mushrooms, you will have mushrooms on your skin and your gut. And the thing is, some of them are good for you, some of them are bad for you. So fungi and animals in biology share same ancestors. So therefore, mushrooms share up to 50% of the DNA with us humans. And they're very different from plants. For example, mushrooms breathe oxygen and expel CO2, unlike plants are the reverse. Wow. And they have to eat food like animals, versus plants can use photosynthesis to create their own energy. And because of this DNA similarity, they're very prone to fungal diseases. So these are candida, and some even say cancer. But point being is we're very prone to fungal diseases. But also mushroom medicine is very bioavailable to us. So about 40% of pharmaceuticals utilize fungi in them. Penicillin would be the most famous one, but it's said that half of the top selling drugs in the world utilize fungi. So if you take fungi or not, you will have them. And if you want to use and improve your health, I think fungi and bacteria are overlooked. Enzymes can be helpful. They are the workers. So if macronutrients are the building blocks of your house, so they're the walls, and then vitamins and minerals are the tools, the power saw and whatever. Enzymes are the workers. That being said, in 20 years of working with high performers, in most cases, enzymes, I've seen very little effects on health. There's some people that benefit a lot from them. Case in point, raw food was a long time a thing, and people said you eat raw food to get enzymes because living foods have enzymes. But then most of those people had to still take enzyme supplements. Now there are people that are on extreme diets or who are unwell that are on super strict ketogenic diet, and they're only eating meat, and they could benefit from enzymes. But if you live a healthy life, you should get enzymes from your food. And if you travel, I think enzymes are a powerful ally. But if you do or don't take mushrooms and bacteria, fermented foods, they will still be part of your body. And there's a risk that if you don't feed your body with the good fungi and the good bacteria, the bad fungi and the bad bacteria will take over. And therefore you have all kinds of gut issues. So all of those are super helpful. And if you can do all three, great. But if I would recommend, bacterial and fungal support is critical because they're part of your life, you want it or not.
Brilliant. What a summary. Thank you so much. So now let's talk about, if someone comes in, let's talk about the main functional mushrooms, the reishi, chaga, lion's mane, those type of things, which are like the top ones that you would recommend. Someone's listening now and saying, okay, I want to improve my microbiome. That's fantastic. Learn something new now, so that's important because we've all got it. What do they do? Where do they go? Do they see a functional medicine doc like myself, or, what do they do?
Well, first of all, I would encourage you to do something. I've seen a lot of the times when you learn about something new, be it ketogenic diet or cold plunge or heat workout is you think you have to be perfect on day one. You don't have to be perfect on day one. You do not need to learn mushroom number 52 or even mushroom number 12. If you learn 3 of these and you apply them, you will reap massive benefits. And if you can see an expert, awesome. But you can also start because these are safe and legal, and you could start yourself and start experimenting, maybe listen to a couple podcasts, read one book, and you're on your way. So where should you start? If there's only one functional mushroom to take, if you're in doubt, start with reishi mushroom, Reishi. It's a Japanese name. The Chinese in medicine call it lingqi. The Latin name is Conoderma. There's a few different varieties. Lucidum, lingqi are the most famous ones. It is the queen of all mushrooms. Already 2,000 years ago in the first Materia Medica and TCM, it was rated as the #1 herb, even though it is a mushroom, and #1 herb of everything, even above ginseng. And if you've ever studied TCM, it's obviously a high praise. So what is reishi? It's a mushroom that grows out of a tree. It is very bitter. It's incredible for immunity and gut health. But I would say its superpower is its ability to calm an overstimulated body and help you recover, particularly improving sleep. So I would take that at night. The second one is the king of mushrooms, chaga, Chaga. Now that's a Russian name. It grows in Finland, Sweden, Norway, US, Canada, mostly. There's a couple other places where it grows, but that's mostly where it grows also out of a tree, in this case, birch tree. And slightly different than reishi. It's more earthy. It's not bitter per se, but chaga is incredibly high in antioxidants. My ancestors during Second World War ran out of coffee beans because we were attacked both by Germany and Russia. We were between a rock and a hard place. And that was tough because Finns drink more coffee than anyone else in the world. Wow. Apparently, we're also the happiest people in the world. I don't know if the coffee and happy are linked or separate. And we started brewing chaga as a coffee substitute. And after Second World War in University of Helsinki, they started studying it and found out that it's incredibly abundant in antioxidants, particularly in melanin, which you've heard for your skin, but it's an antioxidant. And another, the super antioxidant, superoxidase dismutase. And those are like 1 cup of chaga would equal like 30 pounds of carrots in antioxidants. Wow. So that's amazing that I would take in the morning. And then third one, if I would highlight, is called lion's mane. And that's touted for brain and productivity. There's some interesting studies how it's, and this will get a little science easy, but it will be able to penetrate the blood-brain barrier and help repair and protect nerve growth factors. I don't want to go into the story, but nerve growth factors too much, but the nerve growth factors was discovered by an Italian female scientist who was the oldest Nobel winner of all time. And she served in the Italian government until the day she died at 103. And she would take these nerve growth factor eye drops. And her discovery is one of the kind of groundbreaking things for brain and longevity.
So brilliant. Reishi, chaga, lion's mane. And I know that you've started Four Sigmatic a while ago. You've combined them with coffee. Tell us a little bit about your story, why you've combined them with coffee, the lion's mane and the chaga and the other ones that you've used, and what was your thinking around that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I've done this professionally for 20 years and now 10 years with my company Four Sigmatic. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I made more mistakes than I've made the right decisions. And I'll give you a couple examples of the mistakes I've made and how that translates to the coffee. When I first started the company, I was a purist. I was like hardcore. And I was like, I'm going to start a superfood mushroom company. And I'm going to get these mushroom teas that are caffeine free. And there's nothing but like mushrooms and other herbs into people. And very quickly, because the thing is, a lot of things that are good for you don't necessarily taste good. There are some exceptions, but many herbs and mushrooms do not taste good for an average consumer, and they're very bitter. So after a couple of years of not being able to pay myself a salary, basically working for free, it was like a point where our consumers who loved the idea we noticed they started adding it to mushrooms to their coffee, which reminded us of the story of what the Finns did during the war. And that gave the idea as like, maybe we'll just meet the consumers halfway. And there's only two bitters that people love at large, and it's black coffee and chocolate. So we started making hot chocolate and coffee and putting the mushrooms in there, and that got us afar. The other thing that is a discovery is I thought I started a mushroom superfood company, and now 10 years in, it's become clear that people don't care about the ingredients. Like, people don't care about mushrooms or adaptogens. They care about what the mushrooms and adaptogens can do for themselves. And I've now realized that I actually started a mental wellness and mental performance company. And this whole time I thought I started a mushroom company. So yeah, many mistakes, but putting it in coffee has been groundbreaking, and literally millions of consumers who never used these mushrooms are now taking it. And here in the United States, we're sold in places like Walmart and Target, which are very mainstream. And it's surprising how many people who hate mushrooms flavor and the benefit, and then start taking them because they love the benefits and they don't taste the mushrooms in the coffee.
Brilliant. And I found your Four Sigmatic lines like beneficial in the morning. I've got a lot of work at the practice, and I've seen a lot of people, and maybe I've had a podcast late like now. So I use that in the morning, but I am a little bit of a coffee snob, Tero. You're doing whole bean now, is that correct? I haven't seen it in South Africa yet. Is that something that you're distributing worldwide? Because obviously I like my grinder. I like to make my own sort of espresso with it. What are your thoughts with regards to combining the mushrooms and whole beans?
Yeah, it took us years. I think probably we launched it very recently, and it took us, I think, 6 years of active development. So basically, we were one of the first companies ever to figure out a way with temperature and moisture. We're able to combine these mushrooms and adaptogens on the surface of the coffee bean. So we have a high quality, third wave, organic, fair trade, medium altitude, water washed, mycotoxin free, all kinds of buzzwords, coffee bean, and we coat it with these mushrooms and adaptogens. So when you grind it, they're already there, but you can then choose your own grind size. So if you want to do cold brew or you want to do espresso, you can change the grind size. And then you have fresh beans. So hopefully that will be available around the world very soon, but it's a fairly new product, and the technology that took us, again, years to figure out how to make.
Did your consumers come back to you and say that's what they wanted? Is that why you developed it?
Yes, many people wanted. There were coffee snobs who wanted it. That being said, I would say most consumers are not coffee snobs, as you can tell from the concept of Starbucks and whoever Pete's around the world. And most people want coffee that works their taste buds and works their body. And so the ground coffee is the most popular product.
Okay. Tell us about the quality of your coffee. That's important, from the toxicity out there. I think that's very important that people would know. Four Sigmatic is in South Africa. There are many of my patients and in the health and wellness field that, drink it. But I think it would be good for us to sort of advance the reach of Four Sigmatic by letting people know how quality your coffee is.
Yeah. So we've been sourcing coffee for years, and we buy a lot of it. And the most common countries where we source is our decaf coffee comes from Peru. We use Swiss water extracts. So there's a few ways how you can make decaffeinated coffee beans. Most of those involve chemicals. The one way that doesn't involve chemical but is using water is called Swiss water. And we use that method, and we use Peruvian beans. And then for the ground coffees and the whole bean, we use from Honduras. And for the instant coffee, we've been using Colombian coffee beans. All cases organic, all cases fair trade. We tend to use very Nordic flavor profiles in roasting. They're roasted in the United States. So we buy green coffee beans, like I said, medium altitude. We use small co-ops that pay the farmers well. And a lot of those co-ops are actually run by female farmers. And depending on the region, there's kind of variations. All the beans are Arabica variety. We've tried working with Yirgacheffe and a few of the Ethiopians and whatnot, but they're very difficult flavors for most consumers. Like the fruitiness, like some people who love it, but many people don't. So we've found that particularly the Central American beans, like Central and South American beans tend to, when roasted, medium to dark with the mushroom team to work for most people's palate. But obviously coffee is very subjective, and people love what they love, and we're trying to offer people more options on what they want to get.
And how do the mushrooms balance the sort of the jitteriness or the effect of the caffeine? Maybe you can sort of unpack that.
Yeah. Coffee is amazing. So coffee is one of the most studied foods in the world. And there's meta studies. Meta studies are studies of studies. So if there's ever a meta study, that means that there needs to be tons of other studies. It's like the super study. And there's amazing benefits for the brain and longevity. That being said, coffee has two major issues. And for most people, although there's a couple types of enzymes, back to the enzymes, that we naturally might have. So different people react to caffeine differently. So some people are able to flush caffeine faster. But there's main two problems that almost everyone faces. One is that it's fairly acidic, and it has, especially if used a lot and regularly, has an issue with the digestive system. So a lot of people have upset. And the chaga is a mushroom brew that tastes almost like coffee, but it's very alkaline. So what happens is when you combine chaga and coffee, you have a much more pH balanced version that gives people less, let's say, heartburn and stuff like that. The other thing is that caffeine, although again beneficial, is a central nervous system stimulant. So it is a stimulant. And it has a pretty long half-life, between 4 to 6 hours. So if you drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning, this is probably not a problem to you. So that's why I say 1 cup of coffee is great. 2, sometimes. 3, pretty much never. And the 3 pretty much never is because if you take 3 cups of coffee, again, size of coffee cups vary, but that means probably when you go to bed, because of the half-life, you'll still have 1 cup in your system when the time you go to bed because of the half-life. So that's a problem. And what these adaptogens do and these mushrooms do is that they support brain function. So you need to have less caffeine to get the same results. So using lion's mane, maybe you need to have just 1 cup of coffee, but you get the benefits of 2, or more commonly, I would recommend half caff. I'm a huge proponent of half caffeinated, where you get roughly the same amount of caffeine as tea. So some people say, I like tea, and tea has other compounds besides caffeine that are interesting. But I think the main benefit of tea is the pH and the fact that you get less caffeine, more like half of a cup of coffee. And that works for most people. So by taking chaga and lion's mane, you can still enjoy your lovely coffee routine, but not have the 2 main negatives of coffee.
Brilliant. Well said. That's absolutely fascinating. Tell us about your Healing Adaptogens book, all the studies you did, and what an adaptogen is. I know it's scientifically based. I know it's evidence-based. People are throwing around words like superfoods and adaptogens, but I think it's important that people know about adaptogens. I've been using them in my practice for many, many years, things like ashwagandha from Ayurvedic medicine, the rhodiolas, but give us a little bit of a bit of a masterclass on adaptogens, your book as well, when that's coming out.
Yeah. Adaptogen is a very trendy word right now. And in simplest terms, it means natural substances that help your body to adapt to stress. The difference between superfoods and adaptogens is that superfood doesn't mean anything. Now, I like the idea of superfoods. I think you should eat nutrient-dense food. So I'm not against it. But there is no scientific literature really on what superfood means, to the point that in European Union, you're not even allowed to use the word superfood in marketing because it doesn't mean anything. Adaptogens, on the other hand, is an evidence-based word, and it is allowed to be used because it actually means something physiologically. It's a 70-year-old word, roughly, and all of its original research is around medical doctors, and the actual adaptogens been used for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years in ancient cultures. Think of like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, but also many others from Amazon to Scandinavia. And since then, modern medicine has proven out that they are healthy for X, Y, and Z. There's only 2-3 dozen of real adaptogens. Now, there might be more in the future, but we haven't done enough modern science. So if there's a few herbs that you might be familiar with, a TCM practitioner like Fo Tea or Hesho Wu is amazing. There's many of these that might become adaptogens, but there's just not enough studies in the Western kind of medicine system yet. And so why would one take adaptogens? Like I said, they help you adapt to stress, and there's benefits for immunity, beauty, brain, sports performance, mood, recovery, sleep. I'd mentioned things that most people are interested in. And what sets them apart from other things? I'll give you 3 reasons why one would take adaptogens. One, I mentioned, they're evidence-based. And believe it or not, in nutrition, there's not that much things that are evidence-based, surprisingly. There's just maybe not money to be made in natural substances because you can't patent them. But there's surprisingly few human studies, for example, and even less of like double-blind placebos, well-controlled gold standard studies. 2 is that the definition of adaptogens scientifically means that they have to be safe. They're non-toxic. They're not addictive. So they're not a stimulant like coffee. They're not a sedative like many others. And so they are restorative, which is amazing. So it gives you a lot of comfort on how to use them. And then finally, how they work the body system is that you have all these bonus benefits. So let's assume I take adaptogens because I want to do well at work. I'm at meetings, I'm at Zoom calls, and I have this afternoon brain fog. So I start taking a lion's mane, or I'll take a rhodiola, I'll take an ashwagandha, and I put it in my coffee, I put it in my smoothie, or however I take it, capsule. I take it. On top of helping with your brain, now ashwagandha will help you sleep better that night. Maybe a thing like mucuna will make you happier and smile more because there's compound L-dopa, which is a precursor to dopamine. So what's great about them is that they work multiple body systems. So while getting your brain power, you're also getting these bonus benefits that are just kind of like cherry on the cake, if you may.
Brilliant. Sounds amazing. So give us your top maybe 2 or 3 adaptogens that you think would be beneficial outside of the functional mushrooms. Obviously, I think there's about 16 recognized plant and 5 recognized mushrooms. I can't remember the exact sort of numbers with regards to what's an adaptogen and what's not, but give us your top adaptogens outside of the functional mushrooms.
Yeah. If you're an absolute beginner and you don't know where to start, outside of the mushrooms, I recommend ashwagandha. That is one of the top Ayurvedic herbs. Another one would be tulsi. But ashwagandha particularly, it's a hard word to spell. But believe it or not, here in the United States, in Google, you can see what people search. And more people search ashwagandha, which again is hard to spell, than green juice.
Wow.
And that just shows because it works. The other one that I would like to highlight that I think is pretty available globally is turmeric. And it's almost so common that we forget how powerful it is. But turmeric, particularly combined with black pepper in your daily foods or smoothies or drinks, is something I absolutely recommend to everyone. And you can get a lot of health benefits from turmeric for beauty, for sports recovery, inflammation, so on and so forth. So those would be 2 that I would highlight as examples outside of the mushrooms.
Brilliant. We're coming to the end of the show. So just two last questions for Tero. What are the risks? Someone's thinking out here, they start taking a lion's mane. Talk about the risks of functional mushrooms and the adaptogens.
There's very few. Now, same way as like you could be allergic to carrots, there's a very, 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 very small subset of people that might be allergic to some of these. Particularly, I would say probably reishi mushroom would be the one where this family of Ganoderma mushrooms, there is a small group of people that will be allergic to them. You will notice it immediately. It's such a fractional group of people what can I say? There's also certain people that are based out of these mushrooms. So blood thinners, anticoagulants would be another category. So there's pharmaceuticals that use a synthetic form of fungi, or there's like a derivative. So if you put synthetic plus with the natural, you might get a too high of a dose. So those would be two watch outs, I would say. Very small group of people might be allergic. You'll know on your first cup, and you're not going to die, but you will be uncomfortable for a hot second. And then the second one is if you're on, particularly on things like blood thinners, anticoagulants, check with your doctor, because again, you might get a higher dose than what you're meant to get. Hopefully you actually use nature to heal, so you don't need to take medication. But that being said, if for whatever reason you are on strong prescription medication, I would check with a knowledgeable doctor on what can you take.
Brilliant. I think that's very important for people to understand, with anything that can benefit, there is risk. Although with functional mushrooms, what I'm hearing clearly from you, Tero, is that they are very, very safe, which is really, really helpful to know. Last question. We always try and empower the Made to Thrive audience to take accountability of their own health. Many of them have sleep devices. They track their REM sleep. They track their deep sleep. They track their heart rate variability. I'm quite a big fan of heart rate variability. It's not the end, it's not the silver bullet in terms of assessment, but what do these functional mushrooms and adaptogens do to the data that people can collect themselves, the data that they can monitor? Because I think that's important. I mean, yes, we can send for blood tests, but some people don't have the finances or they don't want to repeat blood tests. Tell us about the data from a biohacking point of view, what the mushrooms and the adaptogens do.
Yeah, that's a great question. As a Finn, this is close to my heart. So Polar and Suunto are both from Finland, and heart rate monitors were invented in Finland. Aura, the smart ring, I was an early investor in Aura, and it's a tracking device. There's many other great tracking devices. And like you said, not everybody has the ability to do blood work. Measuring cellular energy is very difficult, and even telomerase. So often like these daily trackers, even an Apple Watch is very helpful. And I think you hit spot on. My favorite measurement is HRV. While not perfect, it covers a lot of ground. And I've fortunately have been I regularly hit like highs of over 200 on HRV, and averages over 100. But you could track, I would say, deep sleep and HRV would be areas that I would probably track. Now, the only thing I would say is get a baseline first for whatever these, because there's genetic factors, high and low, and routines of exercise can positively or negatively impact your range. So if you want to do your self-experiment and you're used to tracking and you have good baseline data, then I think it would be very interesting to work with things like reishi, ashwagandha, or maybe for sports performance, things like ginseng and cordyceps, to see what the results are. But I would track deep sleep and HRV. And if you are an endurance athlete or cardio, then VO2 max, and then EPOC, which now some smart trackers, including the Apple Watch, will even track, regularly used by Suunto and other heart rate monitors. So you can track kind of post-exercise oxygen consumption and recovery periods. But their tracking is a powerful ally. I use it. I love it. But don't make it your master.
Yeah. If
it becomes your master, it's probably going to turn negative against you. And the body's so complicated that sometimes when you have if you have an issue, there's no singular isolated thing that is guaranteed to help. It might help. So take it with a grain of salt, but I would say those are my favorites to track. And some people really struggle with REM sleep as kind of another metric. I would say that's a little more reliable on caffeine, alcohol consumption, for example. If you drink alcohol, could really impact REM. But yeah.
Just a quick question, because I think that's important. Is there a specific mushroom that improves REM and a specific mushroom that improves deep sleep?
Reishi would more consistently help with deep sleep, and I would say probably lion's mane on REM. But I would say they don't work directly. So these adaptogens, they work the body system. So Rishi's mechanic of action more like these triterpenes or cordyceps, like cordycepic acid. They don't work necessarily directly on that system, but they improve oxygen intake, and then oxygen intake, depending on your other factors, could potentially improve sleep. So it's quite individual. But I would say most consistent, what I've seen over the decades and on my own, is ashwagandha from the plants and reishi from the mushrooms for deep sleep.
Brilliant. Last question for Tero. Thank you. Incredible mushroom masterclass. That's the way we're going to punt it out there. Mushroom masterclass with Tero from Four Sigmatic. But we ask a question of all our guests. Sustained transformation is something that we really believe in Made to Thrive. Many people come to my practice. I see chronic patients from all over Africa now with COVID, seeing people in the US. So 41% of our listeners, Tero, are US based, which is pretty incredible. But we're seeing patients and clients all over the world. And one of the biggest things that is problematic is people get sick, they suffer. That becomes the seed of change and transformation. And many, up to 80 to 90% of them, 6 months later, 9 months later, a year, they're back to their old lifestyle habits. Give us maybe 2 or 3 very important keys or pieces of advice to help people sustain their transformation.
Yeah, have a bad memory. And what I mean with that is that you will have mistakes. You'll have a bad meal. You'll have a bad night of sleep. Have a bad memory with that kind of stuff, and just keep going away. So consistency is key. And in herbalism, you say that number one rule of all herbalism is compliance. If you don't have compliance, it doesn't work. The other way to say it is, book you don't read is not going to help you. A gym pass you buy but don't use, you're not going to build muscle. So have bad memory of your mistakes and just get back on the horse. I think that's absolutely critical. Secondly, I would say is don't spend any money, or hardly any money. Like, you literally don't, in the beginning, to make tons of progress, you don't need to spend any money. And Four Sigmatic makes supplements, but you literally do not need any supplements. Now, and I'm not just talking about foraging wild foods, but literally most things are free or almost free. So things like, in the morning, go in the sunshine, get sunshine in your eyes first thing in the morning. Cold exposure, depending where you live, try to be cold, try to be hot, and water, and things that are very inexpensive. I mentioned spices, for example, increase that. They cost very little money to have organic, high quality spices. Everybody can afford those. Start adding a lot of spices to your diet. So don't make it too complicated. And then finally, find 1 or 2 things that are fun for you. That could be playing soccer or football, as we call it in Finland, but play a sport you love. Anything. Is soccer the best exercise in the world? No. But is it, if you love it, should you do it? Yes, because you're not, it doesn't gonna feel like doing it. You'll have community, which means you'll have oxytocin and love and connectivity. You'll have fresh air. So find a couple things you love. Heck, even the coffee. If you love coffee, start putting mushrooms and adaptogens in your coffee. It's such an easy way. So find a couple things, because they're not going to feel difficult, and you'll start getting benefits, and you're going to kind of start stacking odds in your favor. So yeah, have bad memory about mistakes done. And then don't worry about spending money. You can do so much with things that are free, breath work, for example. And then find a couple things you love and just start stacking the stuff you love, instead of trying to worry of things you're not allowed to do. So, if there's a healthy food you love, start having that healthy food more often because it's a food you love.
Brilliant. Well done. 3 incredible pieces of advice from someone who's been in the health industry for a long time. Well, from Made to Thrive, we declare favor and blessing over you, Tero, over your company, over your children, your newborn. Thank you so much for taking this podcast. It's been absolutely fascinating, filled with so much value. I think the Made to Thrive community in Africa, being very, very sort of agriculture and a strong heritage in terms of farming, producing their own foods, I think is really going to respond well to the mushroom boom, And so thank you so much and look forward to working with you. And hopefully we can have a quick chat now offline with regards to really getting Four Sigmatic into many more African homes and into their hands.
Thanks, Steve.